Check 1, 2, 1, 2. Everybody hear me? Yes? Awesome. We don't want to waste any more time. Thank you guys so much for being able to be here, sacrificing your time in order to show up and talk about these issues. We really appreciate it. So thank you all. So what we're going to do, we're going to kind of follow in order of events. I'll lead off with the land acknowledgement, as well as a little something from USG speaking about obviously the corporate center situation, and then we will give it to President Maric to follow up. After which we'll be recording questions from all of you guys in the audience. I'll also speak to that as well in a little bit, but whatever you guys want to share, please share. It doesn't have to be just questions. It could be anything related to the cultural centers or this issue at hand. So, we would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the territory of Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Scatico, Golden Hill, Pawtucket, Nipmuc, and Lenape peoples who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We thank them for their strength and resilience in protecting this land and aspire to uphold our responsibilities according to their example. That being said, again, thank you guys for being present, and thank you guys for being here and willing to share your experiences. One thing I would like to say before I turn the microphone over to our president is please share any and everything that you have on your hearts. We obviously ask for questions, about the cultural center situation, what administration plans to do, what the university at large plans to do, but this is also a listening session, right? Because we wanted to advocate to administration, we could just sit down as USG and talk to them, but we want you guys to share your experiences. We are all here representing different cultural centers and programs, and we obviously don't know what each and every group is going through. So please talk about your experiences in the cultural centers and programs and why they matter. Talk about why the programs that are within them matter and why you as students matter. Any and everything is okay. Just please be respectful of the time and space, and that's really it. That sound good? Yeah. Awesome. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to President Maric.
Thank you, Jason. It's a great pleasure and honor to be with you tonight. Being selected as the 17th president of UConn means a lot to me. I came to UConn 12 years ago to be a faculty. I have 3 of my children graduated from UConn. Number of graduates and students, undergraduates that I mentor, I'm proud of all of them and all of you in this room. So my commitment to you and UConn student first, and that's what I put in my signature. But what I mean, the success that you had in the classroom, success that you have in academic programs, and the success that you have in your career planning and future work. And I want to acknowledge my team who is with me to help to align our priorities with students first. And I have my Gilbert, right, can you take a stand up? He's a Vice President for Students Affairs. Frank Hewitt, our Vice President for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice. Anna Daliva, she's Interim Provost. People says, what is the Provost? Chief Academic Officer. She takes care of everything related to academic. She's equivalent to David Benedict for athletics. That's what I just learned from her. Lloyd Blanchard, who is our Chief Financial Officer. Nicole, who is my Chief of Staff and General. Okay. And then Ellie doesn't need introduction. She's always on with you. So as I said, I'm here today, and I'm here for the first time as your president. I met you as an interim president. I'm here to listen, to understand what are the concerns that you have, what are the issues that you want to concern. I would also like to see your plans, what you are trying to accomplish, and how that is going to enhance the students' experience. And any question that you have, and this is just the beginning of our conversation. So we are going to have many more meetings. As I said, my first 100 days are going to be about listening, understanding the different units, the different budgets, where are the priorities, and then I'm going to come back to Board of Trustees and present everything that I learned through those listening sessions, and how we align our priorities and budget, because budget has to follow our priorities. So I will stop there. Thank you for coming again, and I will be more than happy to answer any question or anybody who is on my feet.
Thank you so much. So now on either side, we have our lovely student development director, Kenzie Robinson, as well as the Hancock University officer, and they will be the ones holding the microphones that you guys will be using to ask questions, share experiences, etc., etc. So Hancock is on this side. Mackenzie, if you could come down on this side. And for everybody that would like to speak, you guys can sort of line up on the stairs. And yeah, whatever questions, experiences, anything that you want to share, please go ahead.
Hey, don't be shy, you know, I know you have these questions, so that's why we are here tonight, so.
Hello? Can you guys hear me? No? Yes. If I just speak like this, is this fine? Yeah? I'm looking at that side. Is it okay if I just... Oh, okay. There we go. Okay, so from our understanding, on behalf of some of the cultural centers, we understand that the budget was not cut per se, that a lot of the funding was just reallocated to different areas. However, the fact of the matter is, the new class of 2026 is, quote, the most diverse class yet. So all of the minority populations are increasing. Why haven't our budget increased? And I understand that our budget was allocated now to the Native American cultural programs and the Middle Eastern cultural programs. And finally, like, thank God that they finally have more funding for them so they can expand. However, the other cultural centers are now left with a lot less than they had before. Like, the PERLAC is $15,000 less now. And how are we supposed to function with that much of a deficit? How are the many cultural centers supposed to function without as much money as they had before, with new populations coming in, with more students coming in to their centers, to provide for their centers, to support our students here? We support them emotionally, academically, physically. When you came into PERLAC, you said that, oh, well, when I asked how we need more money, essentially. When we said that, you simply said that we can get it from alumni donations. Realistically, that's not an option. So how are we going to fix this problem?
So when I mentioned Alumni Association, what I was referring that we have the long-term sustainability plan for many of our activities, including the cultural center. But I would like to have Lloyd to talk about the budget, the process, and I hear you that we have more students and we have more support groups. What I learned from you during my visit, you said this is home away from home. And this is where we get support. This is where we get the tutors. This is where we do the part-time jobs. This is where we get the jobs for our students. So I would like to see that comprehensive plan, what we are doing with the cultural centers. Students, I know that we can always work so hard in providing the student need. So once when we get from you, what would you like to accomplish, how that benefits students, I'm willing to share your plan and how that impacts the students with this group of the people who are then going to look and say, this is how we allocate. This is additional funding that we have to bring to cultural center. This is what we are learning from them. This is where they are struggling. And I would like Lloyd and Frank to talk about the budget and budget process and what they've done this year and they allocated the money. So we have many issues that, and we understand that population is diverse and that cultural centers have to grow, but we also have to look all our priorities. And one of the priorities that we face significant attention is mental health. So we increased the budget for mental health from 12 million to 20 million. We will find the budget for cultural center as well, but we have to look at the plan. So Lord, we want to elaborate more.
Good evening. Thank you, President Maric. Good evening. So, thank you. Mason's already alluded to the fact, and the other student has already alluded to the fact that, is this on? Can you hear me? I've got a lot more second years. So, we've already alluded to the fact that the university did not cut the budget, but there were some reallocations in the budget that I think raised some concern. Fair enough concern. Let me explain the sources of funds that the Cultural Center receives, and I'll explain sort of what happened with the money. The Cultural Centers and ODI receives funds from two sources. One from the university, what we call permanent funding, and the other source is from the students through the general university fee, or what we all affectionately call GUF, okay? So the university provides about $3.7 million this past year, or the current year rather, in its budget, for ODI and the Cultural Center from the permanent budgeting source, from the university. In addition to that $3.7 million, about $352,000 comes from GUF. So while we allocate the sort of central permanent budget, that's my office, the GUF funds come from you, come from the committee that's established within the care of student affairs that votes on how to spend the fees that the students pay and your representatives manage. And so what happened was we've been increasing the funds, that $3.7 million, the permanent share, we've been increasing that over the past few years. There was a large increase from FY18 to 19 of about 25%, and then it's increased modestly from there, from FY19 to current year FY23. And when I say modest, I mean about 4% a year, which is usually enough to pay for increases in salaries of the employees that you pay. Now, also what you'll find, and I'll pass out this kind of a handout just in a second. Also what you'll see is ODI Central, which is run by my colleague Frank Tuitt, has decreased its funding to allocate more funding, the permanent funding that is, to the cultural centers. So you'll see a decrease in ODI funding, and you'll see for each of the cultural centers increases over the last 4 years or so. But when you look at the GUF funding, yes, you will see small declines in each of the GUF accounts for each of the cultural centers, and then that money was used to support the new cultural centers for Native Americans and Middle Eastern cultural programs. So certainly we can reevaluate all of this funding, whether it's the permanent funding or the GUF funding, but please recognize that the GUF funding is student managed. And so you should work through your representatives among student USG and other organizations to sort of appeal to that group for GUF funding. We will work with you, however, going forward at President Maric's direction to support the cultural centers in whatever way we deem appropriate. Please recognize also that we are spending capital dollars to create these two new cultural centers for the Native American Center and for the Middle Eastern Center. So that will probably amount to somewhere between $900,000 and $1 million or so, just to put those centers, get them ready for use. So, but this is a conversation we feel like we will continue to have with you. I just wanted to clarify the funding in this most recent event. Thank you. Shall I take questions or how shall I do this?
No, I think I would like Anne to also talk about the initiative in her office and additional support that she's providing as a scholar, and also conversations CDs that we had about support for the cultural center.
Or I can project. Can you all hear me? This brings me back to my days of teaching women's studies 1104 when I had to project. So it's nice to see you all. I'm Ann DeLeva. I'm the interim provost. I've been here for 23 years, a joint appointment to art history and women's gender and sexuality studies. So my office is primarily concerned with obviously the academic enterprise at the university. And I am very interested in working with the cultural centers on academic programming. So that's a dimension, I think a really valuable dimension of the cultural centers, and that partnership not only with the schools and colleges and centers and institutes that report to the provost's office, but the overall kind of academic enterprise. We've collaborated in the past. I personally have done lots of collaborations with the cultural centers. Some of you may remember, for example, in the School of Fine Arts, where I was dean, we did a year of programming celebrating the arts of Africa and the diaspora to celebrate the anniversary of the African American Cultural Center. So these are the kinds of things I'm talking about. I think there's an important role for the cultural centers to play in terms of general education bachelor's, minors in the cultural and intellectual life of the university. So I will invite you to reach out to me with any ideas or suggestions. I meet with the directors of the cultural centers every semester to talk about programming and talk about collaborations like this. So that's a really important thing. I think in some ways that got a little bit with the pandemic. Some of that was suspended, right, when we weren't in person. So it's something that we need to rebuild, and I really welcome your collaboration in doing that. So thank you.
Okay. Hi everyone. So I am one of the members of the class of 2026, and I'm grateful to be part of such a diverse class. Going into this, one of my main reasons for going to UConn was the cultural centers was Perlac for me specifically, and the amount of connections and different mentorship programs like Nathan's, for example, had. So going into it and hearing, the budget allocation for the cultural centers was a little disheartening at first, I won't lie. But when I first heard about it and we had everyone at Perlac that one day when you came by and how everyone talked about how it was such a great sense of community, I knew I felt that exact way too. So this is just coming from personal experience. I think being able to have these discussions of certain budget allocation and programming and all that type of thing, because a lot of this does, come out of pocket, especially for different fundraisers and that type of thing. It can come out of pocket, and it is very difficult. And our Perlac coordinators and cultural center coordinators have done an amazing job so far. They work day and night, keeping the centers up for us. And I just wish we had a little more support in the background to be able to keep that going. So, as a class 2026 representative, that's what I feel as so far in my first month here, as how it's been.
Thanks, and I really appreciate that you are coming in and talking with your freshmen. As I said, I'm going to walk, I'm going to talk, but more than talking, I'm going to listen. And once when I hear from you and I see your proposals, we are going to sit down and present, and allocate a new budget. But we have to see that picture, what is coming from you, what would you like to accomplish, and how that is going to enhance your experience at the home. And then we are going to put all the different topics of allocation. And as I said, the students' success. So if you say, if we do this way, this is how we feel as a group, and we are presenting this proposal. It doesn't have to be something elaborated, but how that is going to help student success if we want. Why does it matter? Then we are going to see these things that we have here, and we are going to look the budget. Okay. Ellie, anything else that you want to tell, because you are constantly with students, you are listening, you are putting the priorities, you are looking the budget, what you want to friend.
I'm a New Yorker. I think what I am hearing and what I'm really happy about is you're asking for a model and then saying we'll find the resources. And I think in my many wonderful years here, that's the first time that's been presented. And I know Frank has a lot of initial thoughts on that. And I think it's just important for students to know that's what you're planning. Frank, do you want to add it?
Yeah, I have that student input is obviously an important part of this process. We do have professionals who work in the cultural centers who have been putting in hard work, who know what the centers need. So I don't want to come across as we're asking you to write some new proposals and write additional papers. This is really relying on the strength of the leaders in the center, giving them your input and allowing them to do what they've been hired to do and have been doing for some time now. We have that intel. Perlac just went through an external review. They have lots of information to share. It's just a matter of bringing and showing that information.
Hi, so my name is Thumb. I frequent the centers quite frequently, and as a student, I've been able to expand academically as much as I can through the center. I study Asian American Studies, and that would not be possible with the center I frequent. So I do want to mention that these cultural centers and these like conversations about diversity to me are integrated into being an academic. So just wanted to mention that. My main question is that, yeah, so we talked about budget and how technically things aren't being slashed, right? But I do know that things get requested by our really great directors, and they get slashed because they're deemed like not feasible, but they're within budget. So I kind of want to know when things are deemed as important for the budget and for the center.
Why they're being viewed that way?
You know, I can ask, Lloyd about this conversation and what is happening when it comes to budget. Because, Lloyd has a most difficult job. Everybody comes so passionate about everything that they propose. But what you are hearing from me, that students first. So I have, and that's the message, so other priorities are going to be looked differently. And we have the student senator on our budget committee, subcommittee of board of trustee who looks our budget. We have conversation with the students about budget. We have faculty representatives sitting on the budget. So we receive a lot of inputs and Lloyd makes the decisions, and I would like Lloyd to take you more to that decision process. I'm not going to put the Lloyd on burner, but he has been doing this for a number of the years in the CFO office, and he looks everything. And I think he can provide a good insight how he operates with Frank, because the cultural centers are under Frank and under his office. So, Lloyd.
Thank you, President Maric. Very good question. As the interim CFO, we wrestle with requests from all over the university for requests big and small. $1.7 billion goes a long way, certainly, but we're a big university and we're trying to do a lot of things, so there are always challenges there. But my role is to allocate those funds to other leaders, whether that be to student affairs, to the schools and colleges, to the provost, or to the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, who thereby then allocates those funds to their constituent units. So with that, I think this is probably a question for Frank and how he further allocates the dollars we allocate to him.
So we go through a regular budget process like other years across the system. This year in particular, we didn't have the luxury of having access to surplus funding that we've used in previous years to support special requests as they come up. So for example, last year we were able to have staff that directly worked with Native American cultural programs and Middle Eastern cultural programs. Those funds were allocated because we had surplus funding to use. This year we didn't have access to that funding. As Lloyd mentioned, our surplus funding is going towards the renovation costs this year. So that's a significant amount of money we don't have access to. So yes, we did say to the cultural center directors this year, unlike in previous years, we're not going to be able to take requests for co-sponsorships and things like that, just because our budget's being spread a little more across to accommodate some of the additional programs. We don't have the flexibility that we had in previous years because of that surplus funding. So that was this year. Hopefully we'll return to a situation where we have those resources to work with, and then we'll be able to support additional requests as they come up. That being said, we are still trying to find ways to support requests when they come, even though I said don't ask, right? We're still going to try to figure that out.
And what I'm saying, the budget has been allocated, but this is not the final. So once when we understand what are the additional requirements, what are the needs, and that's why I'm asking Mason and Cultural Center to put something together that is very simple. We are going to look through different portfolios of the money, either from Provost Office, CFO Office, and say, where is that additional dollars that we can allocate to you, that you can feel that you are appreciated, that you can move with your activities, and that you accomplish what you want to accomplish at your company.
Hi, my name is Lana. I'm currently a sophomore, and last year I did take ASAC for granted. I didn't really go that often, but this year I did start going a lot more often because I used to be attending more often due to programs like the Asian Mentoring Program, which I thought was a great experience. And then personally, I think the cultural centers are a very good place to foster a community, because earlier, before we even started, you did say that you wanted to promote like student success, which I think if you want to keep that, I think a good way of retaining the student success that you have now is to keep like having a good support system for the cultural centers themselves as well. And also with the cultural centers, they do provide a safe space for a lot of ethnic minorities here that they might not have at home, because a lot of hometowns realistically probably don't have the same community as we do here. I do believe that the budget for all the cultural centers should be increased simply because of, like I said before, it does accomplish that goal. It does keep the retention, and it does promote what you want to achieve. But I do have a question as well. So unless I'm misunderstanding, why is it that the cultural centers are splitting from the same pot with the terms of they're having to sacrifice some of their funds in order to provide for NACP and MECP, rather than having funds already reallocated for them separately? Because I don't believe the cultural centers should be fighting over the same pot of money just for the same goal. Because I do agree that there should be funds for the renovations that NACP and MECP want. It's just the fact that, especially because we are on indigenous grounds and everything like that, but I do think that that should come from other money. We have funds for the new STEM building, we have funds for a residence hall and a new dining hall and a new ice rink, but we don't have funds for the indigenous communities here.
So, I'm sorry, I'm going to call our CFO again to explain how the budget works. I see you're nervous, but you did a great question, a great job. So I'm going to ask CFO to explain how the budget works, from where the funding is coming, and how that funding can be allocated, and who is monitoring this budget. So 26%, this year 30% of our budget comes from state. Hockey Arena, he can explain how that was built and how we have the donors who contribute to Hockey Arena. So, Lloyd, why don't you take it from there?
I guess I have to be recorded for posterity, so I assume everyone can hear me. Fair enough, thank you. The budget process starts in the springtime when we send out a notice to ask everyone around the university to submit their requests, submit their information about their forward-looking revenues, about their forward-looking expenditures, the things they want to do in the coming fiscal year, which begins July 1 every year. And when we get all of those requests, we get together with senior leaders of the university to determine how do these requests comport with our strategic direction. And then we make decisions about allocations based on that strategic direction and other needs. I'll be honest with you. With regard to the university's budget, the permanent funding that I mentioned before, mostly every unit across campus gets a little bit more or a little bit less based on the changes of their organization. Most budgeting in the public sector is incremental. And so it's usually somebody makes a big request that says, we're going to do something different and new for the university. The leadership deems that to be a high priority, then we reallocate funds to support that. But remember, I mentioned that the cultural centers receive funds from two sources, the university and from yourselves, from the students, through the allocation of the GOV funds. So the university allocates the money the way I just described. The way you get funds from the university funds is our allocation to ODI, as I mentioned before, and then ODI works with the cultural center directors to determine your needs at the cultural center level and then to fund those needs. Now, the process to develop the GOV funding is completely different. And I would rather either Michael Gilbert or our Dean of Students to address that particular issue, but it's a conversation among students with student affairs leadership support, and they determine how the gov funds will be allocated to various student activities, whether it's the marching band, whether it's the Jorgensen Center, or whether it's the cultural centers. Those decisions are made at the gov committee level, if you will. Again, all of these questions are open for continued conversations because, as we said before, priorities change, and certainly diversity is one of our top priorities. And so we want to be able to fund your activities at an appropriate level. But that means we have to fund other activities at an appropriate level, and there will always be competition for resources, whether it's competition for university resources or even competition for student resources. And let me, yes. As it relates to the hockey arena, as it relates to the Gantt building and other things that we're building, those projects are built using capital funds. Capital funds are funds that we either get from the state, that the taxpayers of Connecticut pay for. Those are called general obligation bonds. So we borrow money by floating a bond to the market. All these investors buy our bonds, and we get that cash and we build the building. That's how we're going to pay for the new cultural centers for the Native American and the Middle Eastern cultural programs. Okay, but capital funds are completely different. For example, when we build a new dormitory, which we will very soon, we will use what we call special obligation bonds, or better known as revenue bonds, which means that borrowing will be paid for from the revenues that project generates. But the point here is we have capital funds that build buildings and do sort of renovations of buildings. We have operating funds that we allocate for salaries and other expenses, and then we have student funds that pay for student activities, whether they be the cultural centers or other student activities. I hope that answered your question.
Hello, thank you for joining us in this conversation. Very much appreciate you taking the time to come and listen. Me personally, I just wanted to speak to the value of the cultural centers more, as our students already have. Coming to BC University, obviously I came for the education and the engineering program, but a main draw for me specifically was a club, the Bangladeshi Student Association. I personally identify as Bengali American, and for me that was very important because I saw family, I saw community in that. And through BSA, I found a way to reconnect with my culture in a way that I hadn't even done with my family. It really gave me a sense that, as an American, that my people were still here. And furthermore from that, ASAC supports those clubs, and then even further from that, they took that love from my community and allowed me to become a better role model, a community member, allowed me to contribute to the people that gave me so much. So I'd like to speak on that as to why cultural centers are important. But I also have a question. I've heard some concerns about outreach when it comes to the cultural centers. I know that UConn likes to put diversity as one of our main tenets. We talked about how important diversity is to us. But there is some concern with how ASAC and other cultural centers are not always openly advertised. It's almost like it's overlooked. An example that I'd like to give is UConn Student Activities, an Instagram account, a program that everybody sees. But oftentimes you won't see cultural centers events post on there. And oftentimes, like, that is where freshmen go to look when they first get on campus, and they're like, what do I do on campus? UConn Student Activities. So I guess my question is, how is the university ensuring that diversity is just not a token, but also something that we seriously offer to students?
Thank you. I know that Frank is very active on Instagram and Twitter, and I would like him and Ellie to talk about the programs and how they advertise, what is happening at the cultural centers, and what is the value of the cultural centers.
Do we have a Twitter account? ODI. We do have a Twitter account. Yeah. So we have an Instagram and a Twitter account in ODI. We do quite a bit of, I just had to double check because I want to make sure. We do quite a bit of our communication around our programming events and activities related to offerings across the institution. So for example, we get a lot of activities sent to us by other groups on campus, and we will share those events as well. I can't speak to the student activity side of it. I don't know, Michael or Ellie.
Hello, I'm Michael Gilbert. I serve as UConn's Vice President for Student Affairs. And I have to say, you made my night, because I spent a full month working on a project years ago in Bangladesh. It was a wonderful personal experience. So if you have a moment afterwards, I'd love to say hello. To the question at hand, I believe the reference is not about the Office of Student Activities. It's the calendar of events. And so I think it falls on individual organizations and departments and units to post their events and activities and to monitor that information is available and accessible by students and other members of the community. But I will inquire with my staff and student activities to make sure that I'm not misunderstanding and that and if it's a matter of us being able to do more and to bolster that activity, we certainly will take steps to do so.
Hi, my name is Hannah. No, I'm a senior here at the university. I'm president of the Black Student Association, president of UConn Collaborative Organizing as well. I've been very active in the African American Cultural Center since my freshman year. If I can speak quite candidly, I probably would have transferred from the university had it not been for that cultural center my freshman year and throughout the pandemic. I hear a lot of you all speaking about how it's a priority to you, the cultural centers, as well as the work that comes out of diversity initiatives here at the university. And I have a few questions, but there's a lot of people waiting, so I'm going to just stick to one. My question really, I wanted to hear from you directly, President Maric, and I wanted to know if you could speak more to some of the plans you have for diversity and just sort of outreach that you plan on doing specifically, or some of the programs that you've planned. I know the search for a president, bless you, was very exhaustive, and I'm sure a large component of that spoke to some of the plans and programs that you hope to have, especially with diversity being a priority. So I was wondering if you could speak to some of the plans that you have upcoming for this school.
As I said, I'm going to have 100 days of the listening sessions, and I'm coming to this group, and I will go to many other groups to talk and hear what are the priorities, what people want to accomplish. My priorities when it comes to diversity is looking diversity as a holistic approach, and this is one of our values. And diversity means looking at the students' diversity, the faculty diversity, the staff diversity, administration diversity, and then putting that as a plan of our strategic plan. What it looks today, how it looks today, where we are today, how we do the more fundraising to enhance diversity, how do we relocate more money for the diversity from our budget, operating budget, and then how that reflects on our success. And for me, the social mobility and addressing not only the Stores campus, but also access of the students in the regional campuses is going to be one priority. And those students who are in Stanford or Waterbury or Harvard campus should not have less resources than what students have in Stores. And those are the things that I want to do, and those are the things that will happen after town hall meetings and many meetings that I'm going to have at this one. Yeah, go ahead, you want to say something?
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, like, outside of like the 100-day listening program, if there are already things that you've already been planning to establish. So some of the thoughts that you've already had about diversity. So diversity hasn't been like a new idea, or there's like not a bunch of like the concerns that have stemmed from the cultural centers are ongoing ones. So I'm wondering if you already have thought of different initiatives and programs that you had, if that was part of the, I'm assuming it was, but I'm just wondering what some of your thoughts on that.
Yes, yeah, it has been, like what are the students' priorities? And one is the cultural centers and diversity. Another one is the food security. The third one is the sustainability and equity. And the fourth one is having the access to the students' health, well-being, and mental health for the students in the regional campuses. So all of those are going to address not only diversity at this campus, but also diversity at the regional campuses. So I'm looking at complete portfolio, analyzing that with Frank and Mike Gilbert, and saying, what did we do? What we promised to do. We have the study working group for diversity that provided us the plan in 2015. We are looking what we done, what the segments that we met, but more than that, what are the resources that we have to all allocate in order to happen what was proposed at that time by the task force. So we were put off for 2 years during the COVID, but there is a task force and actions that we promised in that plan that I'm revisiting now with team.
I have more questions, but I don't want to take them.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. I think I'm next. I am Dr. Ellen Simeon. I'm a full professor in the Department of Political Science. I have been here 21 years. This was my first job out of graduate school, so I've gone from assistant, associate to full professor. To my knowledge, I am the only African American woman at the rank of full in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. So my comments are twofold. I am currently the ODI faculty fellow assigned to the Cultural Center, the African American Cultural Center. And what I hear from the students that frequent the center is they want mentors. And they will name the departments, the majors. And upon hearing them, I will know, well, there's not a single Black faculty member in that entire school, much less in the department they're naming. And so I find myself feeling as the only one. I don't know how to even put it into words how surreal it feels being the one and only African American woman at the rank of full in the largest college, which is the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. I don't know whether to grieve, to mourn, or it's overwhelming. Secondly, if I say what's on my heart as I move from two worlds, because I've spent 21 years on the faculty side, and I walk from Oak to the Student Union to Dr. Price's office, and we are understaffed and we are under-resourced. There are 2 part-time people that define this transition team of 3. 1 full-time director of operations and 2 people, myself included, who are split in half. And so every week I'm walking from the Student Union to Oak because that's where the operative functional copier exists. That is to say, to make copies, to scan documents just so I can teach my course in the community room in the Cultural Center, I must take a walk to Oak Hall. I've been in the Department of Political Science for 21 years. I have never had to want for anything. If the student workers want to print a document, they give me the heads up. They're sending it to my email address so I can print it from the one functional printer in the entire space. That is to say, we have dated equipment. We have old AV technology for which I can show my PowerPoints and any documentary or video clip. And so as I take that walk each week, I can't begin to express to you the level of frustration, sometimes rage, because it feels like Jim Crow 2.0. Because when I walk into Oak, there's 3 full-time administrative staff secretaries. There are student workers, everyone, every single faculty member, that's 40 plus, has a functional desktop and printer. And we have a state-of-the-art copier. we want for nothing in the Department of Political Science. And this is my first time on what I call the staff side. And it's the first time in 21 years that I'm having to explain, justify, and make a cogent argument as why we need essential equipment that is necessary to perform our jobs. Again, we are understaffed and we are under-resourced. Even when you walk into the building, our space is dated and needs a facelift. And I was in Monty back when it was not renovated. And again, that was an academic space that got a total facelift. And I'd be remiss if I sat in this space and not told you honestly how it feels for someone like myself who is coming from the faculty side. When I say to the admin, I need X, Y, and Z, the response is, okay, got it. And it's there within 48 hours in the Department of Political Science. And we have broken equipment in the African American Cultural Center. And sometimes I go home seething like this is intolerable. It's unconscionable. And I'm not talking about dollars for programming. I'm talking about staff. I'm talking about material resources, equipment. And yes, you walked into our center, and unfortunately I wasn't there because my son had a doctor's appointment that day. But I believe you saw the dated computer lab that's not functional, thus is not being used. And it itself does not have a copy machine or printer for which students can send their material to be printed. So this is sort of from my perspective what I see, not as a student, but a faculty member. And many students frequent our space. Many students frequent our space on a daily basis. And it's my understanding that when it came to the staffing of this transition team, that was a decision that came higher up, for which Frank had to receive sort of consent or permission, which resulted in us being half-time appointments when there was an ask for us to be full-time. So I'll stop there.
Thank you for sharing your journey. Thank you for sharing how that made you feel, how that makes the students feel. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to meet during my touring, but as I said, I walk frequently campus and I'm coming and seeing. I saw how the African American Center computer rooms look, how the conference room looks. And I toured that facility with Nicole and Frank, and we are taking immediate action to make that change. So I'm sorry that your experience has been to the level that you feel the way that you feel. I acknowledge, where it is, and I also acknowledge that we are going to work on that to improve. Regarding the resources, and replacing, you had for a long time the director who retired and stepped down, and I think Frank is looking for the replacement, but Frank, if you can tell more where you are with that process. But when it comes to that resources, I'm fully aware, and I already instructed our facility and chief of staff to look how to help center.
So, as many of you know, Dr. Price retired after 29 years. Instead of doing a simple, let's launch a search and fill that position right away, we decided to pause for a second and do an external review of the AACC, which we're launching. So many of the students in that center will be receiving an invitation to participate in that external review process. Our plan is to launch a search at the beginning of the spring semester with the goal of having someone in place by the end of the spring. At that time, we're also going through in ODI, a review of all of our existing positions in the unit. We're going to be looking at what people are doing, where there are opportunities to address some gaps, and we're engaged in that process with human resources. So that also is going to align with our planning for the upcoming year. So hopefully we'll be able to take a look at the staff in all of the centers and make sure there's alignment across the centers. That's one of our goals. And also look for opportunities for collaborations across the centers, which is something that I know we've all been talking about. So yes, we are short-staffed right now across the centers. We're down about 5 positions. Many of those positions have been submitted for being filled, and we have a couple of searches underway, so hopefully help is coming shortly.
I see many of you online, but I don't know if Mason communicated with you that I have only time until 7 o'clock, and I'm going to be back again. The leadership team from my office is going to stay with you, but I have previously scheduled meeting off the campus at 7:30 that I must attend. So, I will take one more question, but I will be more than happy, to follow up with you and come to your next meeting when you want to have me, and take the actions based on everything that you present to us.
Yeah, thank you for being with us for the amount of time that you were. And for everybody else, the questions, again, if you could direct them to the administrative team, that would be appreciated. But what I did want to ask before you did leave is, number one, I think at this point we all understand that the budget hasn't been slashed, but we are all aware that there are vacancies, right? There's issues in terms of programmatic output. So what I would ask for, number one, is that I'll say this, Dr. Tuitt can only make decisions that he can with the funds that he has available. So in saying that, I would like you to work to get ODI enough money to cover what NACP and MECP needs so that the cultural centers also have enough, because it is not their fault that the cultural centers have less. It is higher up that makes that decision. So that's the first thing I would ask. The second thing I would ask is that the staff vacancies that are currently existing and present within all the cultural centers and programs are filled at the latest of this year, earliest beginning of the spring semester. There are folks that need these positions. There are black women that don't have these positions. There are trans folk that don't have these positions. There are folk with disabilities that don't have these positions. And as students who have these identities and are among these populations, this is who we need. The last thing I would ask, and I don't want to speak for all the directors when I say this, but they know where the gaps are. They know where the issues lie in ways that as students we do not. So one thing that I would ask as a part of your strategic plan, now that you are the 17th president, is that you sit down with them. You sit down with Dr. Simeon, you sit down with Director Rowley, you sit down with everybody else who spends hours serving us, and ask them where those gaps are, and work to address their concerns, work to really make their requests go through, work to work with them, because they work with us and they're here for us in times where sometimes they can't be. So.
Thank you, Mason. I really appreciate, and I have full understanding what that means for you to belong to cultural center, call it home away from home, and get all the support that you have. So you are having my commitment that I'm going to work with the budget. I'm going to work with Lloyd and Frank to address the immediate needs that you expressed now. But I'm also looking for, and Mason, you have been fantastic in collaborating with us and saying, here are the priorities, and presenting those priorities together with center directors to be the voice of the students, continue to be that voice of the students that always comes to the table. And I will be more than happy to come back and say what we've done and what we provided, and the follow-up after this meeting, is this what meets your needs and this what meets your expectations. So thank you all. I will have the rest of my team to answer all the questions that you have, and enjoy the evening and enjoy this time that you have at UConn. Thank you.
All right, I know there's folks leaving, but we still do have time. So if you still are remaining and you'd like to ask questions, please do. We still have Dr. Tuitt here, as well as Louis Blanchard, as well as Michael Gilbert, Provost DeLeva, Denelli Doherty, Nicole Gelston. So there are folks here who are able to answer the questions that you have. So for those of you that do, I will continue to pass the mic down.
My name is Samantha Dove. I'm a member of the National Tucket Pequot Foundation, and I come from the Amos George family line, and I'm the student coordinator of the Native American Cultural Programs, or NACP. We've received a promise of renovations for the ODI Commons, which doesn't just support NACP and NACP alone, but all of ODI and the student body. But our cultural program status remains the same, subpart cultural centers. I want to thank everyone who has shown and expressed support towards our programs. However, our community has a history of erasure at this institution, and only mentioning cultural centers with no mention of cultural programs to follow is failing to acknowledge the inequities that cultural programs face. We have a small fraction of the programming budget of the centers, which has not increased with these budget reallocations. We have no directors or other professional staff, and only two student labor staff, 2 work study staff, and a graduate assistant. We don't wish to be, but we are different from cultural centers. This lack of recognition has been harmful and triggering to Native and Indigenous students and alumni whose safe space on campus was a storage closet up until this past January. All of us here today aim to do better. This was a question for President Maric, but I would still like to ask you all. UConn has expressed interest in building a relationship with local tribes, such as the Mohegan and my tribe, the Mashantucket Pequot. How will you start off UConn's relationship with the Native community on the right foot now by supporting Native students? Do you have any current plans to actionably support the cultural programs in receiving equitable cultural center status outside of the renovations?
So I'll start this and then I'll ask Ann to talk a little bit about Chris's position. So as you know, we submitted a proposal. Many of you got a chance to present to the Board of Trustees about Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee about our commitment to supporting Middle Eastern and Native American cultural programs. The proposal was to move those programs to cultural centers, and that the home of the cultural centers would be in ODI Commons. That plan is still in place. What we're waiting for, in my understanding, is the first phase of that was to address the renovations, which we've gotten a commitment on. And once we've addressed that, the next phase is to go to staffing, which we will again put in our request for our budget for the upcoming year for that to happen. We attempted to get some staffing for the Middle Eastern and Native American cultural programs. We were not able to do that this year, so that's why we have the students and the graduate assistants in those roles. We haven't given up on that. We recently had an interview with someone to help us work in a faculty fellow role. The only problem was that they were a staff person, so we couldn't make that happen. So we're still looking to get some staff, because that's important. And we'll go through the proper channels to see where we land on that one. In terms of, I think, this larger question about support for Native and Indigenous communities here at the institution, given the history of the institution, we've had some conversations, particularly with the Provost's office and Julie Wade, the Dean of CLAS, and I'll ask Ann to speak a little bit about that.
Thanks, yeah, I'm happy to. Actually, if you, Julie Wade, the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, created the Native American and Indigenous Studies program, and several years ago she hired in, I believe, 4 faculty members to teach in that program. This past summer when I came into the Provost's office, I shared with her funding to hire an additional line, and we've brought in a wonderful visiting faculty member who actually worked at the Mashantucket Pequot Museum and is very engaged in culture and community, with the idea that this new faculty member could not only teach but also advise and help us to expand the cultural center. And I would just say that I'm very, or the program I should say, I'm very supportive myself of seeing the Native American program grow to be a full cultural center. I understand what you're saying about the importance of that, of being a full service cultural center and the difference that that makes. So whatever I can do from my office to support that process, I'm happy to do that.
And let's not talk about Chris as if he's not in the room. Hey, Chris. Thank you.
Chris, welcome. I didn't see you there behind your mask. I'm sorry.
No, that was on me. I should have pointed to.
Hi everyone, my name is Khadijah. I work at ASAC underneath the Salam program, which is the only space at UConn that is tasked to address Muslims and safe spaces that we have for them. And it's led by literally only me and Noura, if you want to stand up. We're the only paid Muslims at all in the entire university that are tasked to address Islamophobia on this campus directed towards Muslims, which is a huge issue. You know, why is there only 2 student staff with a minimum wage getting tasked to do all that? So last semester we hit it really rough. There was a lot of bad things that happened to the Muslim community, but at the end we were able to have an Eid celebration. So this is something that was a huge win for us. We had about 200, 300 Muslims come together. We canceled exams for them, got them rescheduled, and we were able to just have a great day of celebration. This was sponsored by the university admin, ODI, ASAC, but this year with the reallocation, we don't have that surplus, we don't have that allocated budget for the Eid celebration. That was the first one ever, I want to make that clear. The university has never done anything like that before, and it was all because of 5 Muslim staff asking administration to support that. So I guess I was wondering, you know, I know the president isn't here, but how can we make sure that that happens continuously, making sure that that's an annual thing, and that the Muslim students don't have to, you know, pay for those types of programs?
So we were able to pull that off last year from generous support from the provost office, and we had, it was collaboration, as you mentioned, between multiple offices, including the Asian American Cultural Center. We committed last year to making sure that that was an annual event. That commitment remains, but yes, we're gonna have to figure out how we're gonna fund it. So it's gonna happen.
Yeah, honestly, whatever you need, what a beautiful thing that we should do for our community. So Frank, you and I will be in touch and we'll figure that out. Thank you for bringing that forward.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to a follow-up email and meeting.
Yes, we will.
Hi, my name is Ali Pinedo. I'm currently a senior nursing major. I'm current president of Lynn Theta Alpha Oxford Incorporated. In the past 4 years, I have been a floor mentor for the public health learning community. I've been an academic achievement
And I've also held many different hats here at the university. I know that President Maric
has talked about the importance of programming and that UConn needs to see some statistics. At UConn, and particularly at PERLAC, Metas has been around for over 10 years. PERLAC has celebrated over 50 years and is continuing to experience the same struggles it experienced since opening its doors. The cultural centers have been one of the most consistent things here at the university. How do we make cultural centers a priority and showcase the importance that the university needs to see? Because I'm not the only student who wears many different hats, yet this is something that I have to fight for the most, is for cultural programs here at UConn. And what success does the university needs to see in order to make cultural centers the priority to allocate funding?
So I've had a chance to visit with many of the cultural centers over the past couple of weeks, just in response to the latest concerns. One of the things we've consistently talked about is the importance of student voices. Right? As soon as I said student voices, it stopped. Right? Continuing to ask the hard, important questions you're asking. That's going to help right? That's going to continue to keep on our radar the things that are needed to ensure that the cultural centers have. I was privileged to be at the Board of Trustees meeting last week. Some of you were there as well during the announcement of President Maric. And one of the things that each of the trustees talked about was the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion to the institution, to them, and to President Maric. And so I think you get it from the highest leadership of the institution. You clearly get it from the folks who are working in the cultural centers. We will continue to advocate for you and for what the cultural centers need. Now, we also understand that we have to do some additional work in terms of fundraising, being more effective in securing grants and things like that. So we'll have to build some capacity for us to be able to do those things, but we're committed to generating the resources needed to support the cultural centers.
Hi there, my name is Caitlin. I am a third year MFA student. I'm also the GA at ASAC. My question circles around cultural competency. So President Maric said that there is an increase from 12 to $20 million for mental health. I'm wondering, because a lot of departments, when students are in need, they send students to cultural centers or to Shaw to get mental health help and resources, but there is such a stigma for many students who come from different ethnic, cultural backgrounds, and it's difficult for them to overcome that at times, to reach out for help. So what is the school's commitment to becoming more culturally competent to provide students with these resources, even if it's funneled into the mental health sector? Because cultural centers and programs are the resources that support students culturally, academically, socially, more holistically. And it's not professional help on any medical scale, but it is enough of a second home to provide students a sense of belonging and a sense of home that could really increase, the way that they feel at school. And my secondary question goes towards, why is the onus being put on cultural centers and programs to create this plan, to ask for permission and dollars to increase student well-being and student diversity, sense of belonging, when that is such a selling point for UConn with the incoming class of 2026. That is the first thing that I read on that newsletter being sent out. But the money trail doesn't follow up.
Ellen, you want to take the first part of the question?
Yeah, happy to take the first part of the question, and just 1,000% agree in what you said, that when we both reviewed our own practice in Shaw and did the mental health task force, the outcome was all doors are not open to all students. And so that led to a really significant reorganization, particularly in mental health, but also the creation of 3 positions that look at training and development for inclusive practice among all of our providers, not just mental health, but also the medical and health promotion teams. I would like the same thing for ODI. And so Frank knows he has a partner in me, and to whatever degree we join in that work and put together a similar argument for what we've done for our healthcare, I'm happy to do. And Frank knows this is a promise I made to him when he started, that no one does this work alone, and we have to do it together. And I think that model that we used for healthcare could be replicated to answer the question that President Maric is asking us today, which bridges into your other question, which I'll defer to others on that, but that might be the way.
So to add one thing to that point, one of the things we've been having some preliminary conversations about is how can we increase the capacity of the workforce at UConn to deliver on our DEI promises, right? That there is, for capacity, a knowledge, ability, and skills to do it effectively that are required. And part of that is training. We don't have enough bandwidth to do the type of training in ODI for sure. But I would argue in the places where we would expect to have it, HR, Office of Institutional Equity, we don't have the training bandwidth right now to implement that kind of initiative. So we've been outsourcing it, and it's sort of, you know, the units that take initiative are the ones that are moving on that. Two things that we're trying to do right now is identify additional resources that can help us with that. So we're in conversations with a national organization called Academic Impressions that will provide, if we enter into a relationship with them, a series of resources that will provide professional development opportunities to our staff. The other thing we're doing is, some of you may know if you're a grad student or an employee, that there's a mandatory diversity training, awareness training that's required for new employees. That training has been updated. We're in the process of creating a new platform to deliver that training, and our hope is to launch that soon. But that's not enough. We need, for example, for managers who move into leadership positions to go through required additional training. We need folks who are in all senior level positions. So just to give you another example, in 2 weeks we're delivering a DEI training to new execs that onboarded in the last 2 to 3 years. So those types of things will be initiatives that will continue to roll out to make sure that more and more folks here have the cultural competencies you're talking about. I don't know that I have anything else to add about your second point. I think I tried to make that point that we have dedicated professional staff who have been engaged in this work for some time, who have been advocating for the types of resources and needs that are there. We will continue to do that. We're also engaged in, with a couple of the centers already, reviews of our existing sort of mission, scope, purpose, and goals, and that process will result in some new understandings of what some of our gaps and needs are, and also what some of our strengths are, and we'll be bringing that information forward as well. So I personally, as I said before, students need to be able to provide input, but it's our job as professionals to move that information forward.
Hi, my name is Eunice. I'm a sophomore here at UConn, and Mason mentioned this previously, but I know you are looking for new positions to fill regarding your staff, and also when it was previously mentioned that there's only one African American woman in the political science department, that made me just wonder and think that if we are looking for these new positions, is it possible for you all to make it a priority to look for individuals from diverse backgrounds, from refugee and from immigrant backgrounds, from people who have been in these situations where the students are now, and understand where they're coming from, and can understand their concerns and their worries, and make them a priority because they have that background knowledge and they have that experience, which may not come from someone who would normally fill those positions if we weren't making that a priority. So I would just like to ask if you all can ensure that during the process of when you're looking for someone to fill these positions, and when you're looking for people to bring in, bringing out new initiatives, if you can make sure that they are like from LGBTQ communities or from diverse backgrounds during your hiring process or like during your scouting process.
So yes, we can do that and have done that. There are a couple of things that I think are important to know. We have recently, I'll speak to the faculty side first, and then I'll get to the staff side. We recently created a faculty, what we call a faculty hiring guide and resources. which is almost exclusively about enhancing diversity. What that did was bring together from multiple different sources that were spread out across several different websites, all of the best practices related to enhancing diversity in the faculty hiring and search process. We embarked and started a similar process on the staff side. That is going to be completed this year as well. So what's important to know that is a best practices resource. It's not necessarily a policy guide. There are laws we have to follow that prevent us from making hires based on identities specifically. But we can do everything we can within the law to ensure that we are prioritizing. A second thing that's happening is HR is about to release a set of new practices for hiring that require, as a part of the search process, statements on diversity, questions as a part of the interview process related to a candidate's sort of previous background with diversity, and opportunities throughout the search process for the candidates to demonstrate their competence. So all search committees will have access to that information, and that will be built into, ideally, all search processes that occur across the university moving forward. That is coming to the senior leadership team shortly for endorsement.
Hello, my name is Tasi. I just wanted to talk a little bit about my personal experience real quick, and then I had a question as well. I'm in my third year. I too, along with my friend over there, was a big part of BSA, the Bangladeshi Student Association. Just like him, and we grew up together actually, so it's really funny that we kind of reconnected at UConn, but a big part of our experience, that is a shared experience for me, was that really reconnecting with my culture. I feel like at home, it isn't the same. I feel like I didn't really know anything about it. I knew whatever I saw, but not what I experienced, and I kind of came together this past summer when I actually went back for the first time in 9 years, and it was a really fulfilling experience. Now, I was able to have that because I became involved in the Bangladeshi Student Association, and I feel like in general cultural centers have provided a way for people to understand themselves in a way that you really can't do otherwise, because this is a part of you, as an American, you meet other Americans, other people that live here, and you understand that shared experience, but there's so much about yourself as someone who is a different background that you will not get from just meeting someone else. And I feel like what this stems into, for me personally, college isn't just about school. It is a big part of it. It's about learning as an academic, but it's about learning as a person, learning about yourself, learning as a social person, inner and outer, mental health, all that kind of stuff. It's so rooted in the college experience. I feel like UConn has done a good job of addressing the academic side of things. We build new buildings every 2, 3, 4, 5 years. We've gotten a lot of great buildings, a lot of great resources. Sorry, I don't know your name, but you were mentioning how as a faculty, you're able to have all these resources. As a staff, it is a different story. And I feel like what I was thinking while I was listening was that we are here with all the same mission. We want to provide the best experience possible for our students. And if you're gonna have a cultural center and you're taking away funding, that's moving, not necessarily taking away, reallocating, but not being able to do all the things you want to do, it's like doing things half-heartedly. If you're gonna do it, I feel like it's important to do it right, fully. And I feel like my experience in being able to have the Culture Center as a part of my journey so far has allowed me to develop into who I am now, and will help push me to become even better. And I want other students to have that. So now my question is, I think we're all here today, a lot of us are here because we're not necessarily confident in the current leadership in what they're going to do in that sense. Obviously, I want to be confident in everyone here. I want everyone here to support me, and I want them to give me some peace of mind that I will be moving into my senior year next year as fulfilled in that way. And I do think there are points made here today and progress here just from you guys being here. But what can you guys do? What do you plan to do to ensure that confidence of other students, not necessarily just people here, but everyone in our school? I don't necessarily know how people feel fully, but I'm not going to speak for them. But I also can say that this is a new presidency, new establishment, a new administrative establishment, and how are you going to be able to gain their trust in the sense of supporting these cultural centers, supporting diversity, just as UConn has been claiming?
Thank you for that. I think you've heard from everyone who's had a chance to speak on the part of the leadership team here that there is a commitment to the cultural centers and a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. There were some specific asks made here tonight. We'll have a chance to meet as a group, talk about those, and come back with a response. That we can commit to, right? So you will get some responses to the questions that were asked tonight. Is that fair to say? Yeah.
I am sure I am Grande, speaking Harvard, Connecticut, political science. My name is Sandy Grande. I'm a professor in the political science department. Hey, Evelyn, glad to see political science in the house. I'm definitely the only tenured Indigenous faculty member at the entire university. I think I'm one of two on campus at the entire university, and that includes all the branches. I want to just acknowledge everybody who's here and all the students' courage, and I just think it's wonderful that you're here advocating for yourselves. I have a couple of points. One is, I hope this is the last time that I am in one of these meetings in which the situation of NACP and NASA and MENA are called into the room the way that they have been tonight. They are cultural programs, not cultural centers. I think it's problematic to continue to kind of raise this funding question that puts them in as the most precarious cultural programs. In a position, I think it's harmful to them to kind of, even though I heard all of you say you understand that it isn't like, everybody competing over one pie, the whole pie should be much larger. But I think it's harmful, and I also think it's sort of factually incorrect. I'm happy for it to be corrected on this, but the funding is to the renovation of the space, which is for everybody. It's for the commons. There hasn't been any infusion of funding into their budgets. So it's not only harmful to really precarious groups of students that are quite small, it's also, I think, factually incorrect. So I just hope we find different language to talk about the need for funding and for priorities, and to make that ask. I think also I just want to say, it is lovely to have Chris Noel here, but that came from a faculty initiative and a faculty retention package. The three of us that were hired together, all of us had offers to leave in 1 year after winning it. We had the tremendous support of the provost and the two deans, Julie Wade and Kate Kacha, that have been mentioned. And they have been our stalwart support from day one, but I just wanted to make that clarification as well. So my question is for the immediate, team, or whoever has the ear of the president. I heard the students ask several different times in a few different ways for the president's vision. And I think they deserve that. And along with that, I think a definition of diversity, her definition of diversity, how she understands that term, would be really helpful. Because I think it's very easy to say the board thinks it's important. Who's going to say they think it's unimportant? Well, some people say that these days, but not typically folks in these kinds of positions. So I think what we need is a more clear definition of what does she mean by diversity. If it's everything in the marching band and the hockey team, you should know that. if there's an accounting for the kind of asymmetries around race and ethnicity and social class and gender and sexuality, that would be helpful to know. What is the understanding in the president's office? I've also was an ed scholar in a former academic life, and the last I looked at the literature, there isn't a crisis of marching bands and retention at university, or hockey teams and retention at university, or in terms of resources are getting pushed out. There is an ongoing crisis since the very beginning of the establishment of universities in the 16th century around with all the folks that are in this room, basically. So I just want to ask one more time on their behalf, I guess, to get a sense in a statement, and I don't know that it matters, but what is the president's vision? What is the president's plan and vision for diversity, and how is she defining it? How does she imagine the future? This is such a precarious time right now in higher education, but there's lots of different competing ideas and visions for the future of the university. So I think we should, everybody in this room deserves to know what that vision is, so then we can rally around it optimistically, so we can figure out how to push it forward. But we can't do that if we don't, and I think it's really unfair to the students to say, well, I'm waiting for your proposal. They're here to study. You're here to stay here to get the most out of whatever it is that you want to get. And this is part of the work. This is really important work. You're all getting, this is part of your education too. But I think they deserve that. So I don't need to be responded to with that question or ask delivered to the president. Thank you.
I'm going to try to make this short because I know people have places to be, but so I serve as the Chief Diversity Officer for USG, and I applied for this position. I run for this position because I felt like my experiences uniquely made me kind of have a different sense of exactly what diversity and equity and justice and inclusion on this campus would look like. I've lived in 5 different countries, like coming to UConn, like Hannah said before, I would have transferred if not for the cultural centers, because my experiences have been rooted in diversity and community and how different people from different backgrounds connect with each other. And it's just, especially with COVID, like being confined to your dorm, like you don't have those experiences, but coming in my sophomore year, like meeting people, like having conversations. I was an RA last year, my residents were amazing. It just really opened my eyes to what UConn could be and like exactly what like some parts of UConn offer to students who crave like connections with people from other backgrounds or people from their own backgrounds. And hearing about this whole budget reallocation thing, initially the word that was thrown around was like defunding, and that I really panicked because the ACC has been I met my closest friends there. Like we hang out every day, and it's just I never would have made those connections if it hadn't been for the ACC. And seeing, sorry, I'm just shaking right now. Seeing what the ACC is and hearing what other people have experienced within their own cultural centers and programs it's really heartbreaking because I feel like this conversation needs to happen, but I feel like all of this would have been avoided if we just had like some transparency from you guys, if you guys were able to tell us, okay, this and this is what's happening. Like I feel like we don't have to come to you and ask you what's going on. Like if there's any changes that's gonna happen that you feel like, not even that you feel like students would have problems with, if there's any changes, period, within the cultural centers or programs that you feel that are gonna like change things, I feel like you guys need to be upfront about that. We don't need to gather and make noise before you guys decide to put out a statement. We don't need to do that. These things need to come from you. And I get that sometimes we need to take the initiative to tell you what's happening within our spaces for you to kind of make those changes. But at the same time, there's some things that we don't, like there's some, especially more legal, professional, like more administrative things that you guys handle that we don't have any access to. And I just feel like it would be so helpful if we had access to those things, if we just knew what was going on behind the scenes, because it's not fair to just sit here and just wonder what's going on and just kind of like have all these fears about what's happening. And honestly, that breeds misinformation and it just creates panic, and it's not great, especially coming from like, especially for someone who basically like, I feel safer in communities where I know that there's a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds, but I know that everyone is having a chance to experience from other people and have a chance to also kind of like share their cultures. And these conversations really honestly, it's just heartbreaking. I just want to ask, like, have you guys thought about any ways to make your processes or like anything within your offices more transparent to us? And I personally feel like they should be any big conversations that are had. I feel like these need to be communicated with students. And it's just, because at the end of the day, I'm trying to make this sound nice. At the end of the day, this is our university. We are the ones experiencing what's going on here. And I get that it's your job and you're taking these decisions, but these decisions affect us. So it's just, it would be great if we had an insight into what was going on, if we had an insight into all these decisions that were taking place, especially big or small. It's just, it would be great. Because 2 weeks ago, I was in a panic. I didn't know what was going on. I was calling my mom and I was like, something crazy is happening. I might have to I'm kidding. But it's just, I really feel like we need to have access to these things, and just so that students feel more secure in like what's happening, especially if some decisions are about to be made, like we can have input into what we think is better for us as students. Because again, this is our campus. We're experiencing these things. Everything that you guys institute, it affects us. Some of us, these are our homes year round. I don't see my family until like summer. I haven't seen my mom in 6 months. And it's something that like, this is basically my second home. So I just feel like, especially with these decisions and everything that you guys do, everyone here, just let us know. Because I just feel like hearing these conversations about budgeting and all that for the students, especially students who are really scared about what's happening within their spaces, it would feel so much better coming from you guys directly and not students who are, I mean students as well, but it's just communicate with us, is what I'm trying to say.
Hear you loud and clear, and hopefully those of you who got a chance to meet with me when I came to the cultural centers felt like I was being open and transparent. That is something that I am committed to doing on a consistent basis, not when we're in a state of crisis. We have been working on improving communication across our unit. It's something we've been talking about and trying to do a much better job of. And that's where, the focus on building one ODI has been, and you'll see more initiatives committed to that kind of effort. We probably should have begun this meeting today by apologizing for having the meeting in the first place. And I mean that. The fact that you all had to take time out of your student life to focus on something that you have very little control over is a failure on our part. Right? Absolutely. And it is our responsibility to ensure that future meetings like this are from a place of how can we build on our strengths and not working from a sort of deficit kind of foundation which this conversation started on. To your other point, this can't be a one-off thing. It has to be continuous, ongoing. We could point to the pandemic as an excuse, but the reality is we need more in-person FaceTime between the leaders of the institution and the students in this room that are focused on our collective vision for the promise of UConn that you talked about. I can tell you that all of the folks in our unit care 250% about your success. And they work the hours that they put in with often very little recognition for that support and that labor. And the faculty who show up on a consistent basis to support you do that also without it counting in ways that support their success and their movement through their professional careers. We have to get to a point where it's not just those folks who are taking the time to make sure that you have all that you need to be the brilliant students that you are. That brilliance was on full display tonight. So I want to thank you all for showing up in your full, authentic, real, powerful selves. And I look forward to much more opportunities to engage with you all from that standpoint. This is, as President Maric said, the beginning of a conversation, not the end. And we look forward to more opportunities, not to hear just what you have to say, but to provide some answers to the things that you've already asked for. All right? Will that work? Thank you all.
Sorry, close this out real quick. If you guys can stay with us for just a second, I'm sorry. But first and foremost, to echo Dr. Tua's points, thank you guys so much for showing here. You know that there's things that we can do better, and you believe in your superpower, so I appreciate that. A couple of things. One, I wanted to, first of all, send a shout out to UCTV for helping us run this event, USG for putting everything on, but at the same time, we are not going to stop these conversations. We are not going to stop our advocacy in this degree. The first part of that is we have an ad hoc that I formed earlier this year called the Share the Student Experience ad hoc, which invites student organizations to come and have these conversations with administration in a more closed setting. So if you are interested in joining that ad hoc with your organization, or you just as a student, Mackenzie's standing right here, so please, before you go, share your email with her, and we'll reach out to you as soon as we have a meeting scheduled and a time set up. That being said, I think there was something else, but I'm forgetting at this point. But anyway, thank you guys so much for coming. I appreciate you all. I love you all. Please get home safe. Much love to you. And again, thank you. We will not stop this conversation or this fight. Appreciate you.